can I pass on from this flight, or what can we pass on from this flight? Because I'm hoping Jake and Chris and Peter are also going to chip in here. And as you can imagine, in sort of 100 and sort of 70 odd kilometers of a flight, 160 from the hill, there's a lot that sort of actually happens. And you know, so the climb out, certainly got quite a few things to say about the climb out, and building a good climb out sufficiently early, sticking together. Like I say, you know, I'm so convinced that was the key to that flight that I'm writing some code to work out some numbers based on that. But certainly flying in this area, sea breezes, very surprising. Lee side climbs as well, figured twice in this, and searching and low saves are also features. You know, we did have times where we were switching gear as well, flying fast and slow, and that was very necessary. And it's with this tool, Avery, really easy to show you some of the thermal behavior that we got as well. And so just reviewing that and actually paying attention to what was happening to the other people on the flight. It's really helpful for your background knowledge of what is happening with the thermal and how it morphs as you rise up in it. So I have a few sort of nice photographs.
Pete, just a quickie, if I might. Can you just go to the first map?
Yes. Yeah.
Just an observation, but I mean, you've got all the highways marked in there where people have flown, and you can see very clearly Derbyshire and the Dales. You can see Pendle, Parlick, and Cumbria, but nothing there really from Model Ridge or Carlton Bank, which is, you know, Model Ridge has a reputation of being a classic XC site. Yeah.
It's I think it's just a small population, so it's not that it's not flown very often. I don't think it's flown very often with a club of sufficient size to be comparable, certainly with Derbyshire or the Dales.
Yeah, I'd say that Model Ridge is a really good site once you've got 50k away. Because it often isn't very good there. It's often low cloud base, sea breeze comes in, it's a bit hit and miss really, compared to the Dales. That might explain it why.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the Avery for this, which it's just an absolutely fantastic tool. And can everybody see this animating okay?
Good.
Yeah, lovely. Okay.
It looks good.
Okay, so
at all. What do I need?
You can't see anything, Dave. David? No.
Well, I see you. That's fine. Carry on. It's fine. It's fine. I'll follow you.
Dave, are you on an iPad or on a phone?
I'm just on my mobile.
Can you flick with your finger to the right or the left, and it might come up with the additional screen?
There it is. Yeah. No, I got it. So you've got 2 screen speeds, is it?
Yes. But I'm only sharing one screen.
Yeah, no, I have it now. Carry on.
Okay,
right.
Great. So for anybody who doesn't necessarily have it, I'll just put the URL in the chat, just in case your broadband squelches out or something. Okay, cool. I'll set the sort of the context for the day. So it was kind of, I'd say, showing a 4. You know, I don't think it was a 5 everywhere. on the day. There may have been a few areas of highlighted 5. It was looking good for the whole for a lot of the country, but it wasn't looking sort of epic. So I remember being at Jake's arguing the toss on the wind quite early in the morning. Jake was a bit annoyed at me about that. Doesn't like getting out of bed. But also we were certainly in conversation with Richard Meek, because Richard was planning a flight to goal from Derbyshire, from probably Lord's Seat, I think. And it was certainly looking less windy up at Derbyshire, and I think what argued the toss for us is that we'd flown Carlton Bank and Model in similar conditions before, and it was a quicker journey, so we were kind of being a little bit lazy, I guess, but we're choosing a site that we that we were more comfortable getting to, and it was indeed quicker sort of getting there. One of the other things we did was leave a car on the A59. So if you are flying cross country with buddies, you think about where you're going to be landing downwind, and or how you're going to configure your retrieves. So if you can buddy up with a mate and leave a car strategically somewhere helpful, that's really good. So we left Chris's car on the A59. Might have helped, did indeed in the end. So we were on the site. It's a short walk up from the Model Ridge car park, and it's pretty tiny up there, and difficult to sort of organize everybody launching at the same time. But that's certainly quite an important point, is that you all want to be in the air as early as you can be, so that you can be sort of settled, comfortable, and you all want to be in the air as a group, so that you're not waiting for a tail end Charlie. You're not waiting for people who could be in the gaggle, giving you skills, giving you searching capability in the gaggle, but they're still faffing around on the floor. On the faffing around part, we'd done a fair bit of that. We had a few Frank Spencer moments. I hadn't sorted out a battery that led to my navigation, or one of my navigations, failing on the mobile phone 2.5 hours into the flight. That battery that I gave to Jake for his instrument for navigation, that was flat. Jake hadn't charged his instrument. Dave Smart, who's a regular with us, hadn't turned up with his helmet, and after flying decided he couldn't fly without a helmet, and left us, went off back home to get his helmet. So proper Frank Spencer moments all round there, but we did manage to all take off very successfully. Certainly windy on takeoff, and that was remarked by more than a few people out there. And then, oddly enough, once we were on the hill, not getting tremendously high despite the wind that was there, so quite a lot of Venturi there for that day. But certainly one of the rules I have is, any time I'm getting a little bit of height, and it tails off over the back, I'm going to spend that height by going forward. So I'm getting a bit of height here with Jake and Chris. I should say Pete Darwood is with us and flying at this point. I can't show Pete Darwood's track because Avery only shows 3 tracks at once, unless you pay for it. And I'm a Lancastrian, so we'll make do with 3. I'll ask you to imagine Pete Darwood, and I'll tell you where he is for certain points in the flight. But you can see there Chris has had a couple of big forays out front. And the reason that you're going to want to do that is that when the thermals come that are going to take you out from the hill, they're going to be triggering early because they're strong thermals, and strong thermals aren't blown onto the side of the hill as much as the weak thermals are. And you see, you know, there's pretty much quite a bit of angle. Jake's carving that at the moment there, you know, barely going up for the amount that he's going back. And it's about this point again, I'm searching out front. Just drop down here, you can see from the curtain how far out I am in front. So I'm pretty much off the face of the hill, but this is still quite steep wooded area. But you can imagine that the thermals are going to be sourced in these fields and triggering from the rough area here. And indeed, you know, I've got this foray going out. I'm coming back low, and then I feel it. So if we just kind of take it back, you can see I'm out front again. And that's when the climb starts. Okay, so that's the climb out from the hill. And I'm just showing a quarter of a meter of a second there, but you can see how far out I am in front, and Chris too. And then everybody's got eyes on whoever's making it. And if I can just spin round, you can see that climb out is a little bit steeper. And I had eyes on Jake and went over to Jake's climb. So, you know, talk about thermal behavior. Then I was on this side, Jake was on this side. And the two were sort of converging together. You know, I made a little bit of a move over, but, you know, two tendrils of a thermal were probably converging together there. And we were getting a good climb out at maybe, well, certainly 2 meters a second. And then I think, you know, the mistake certainly started for me there. We're in a gaggle of maybe, I don't know, 6 or 7. Would you say, Jake, Chris?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. For that, and so that was at base at 1,300 meters. I'd gone out to the side simply just to extend the time I'm at cloud base, to wait for people to catch up. And then in doing that, you know, a bit of Frank Spencer carries on. So, you know, some of the distance or this flight happened despite what we were doing or what I was doing at some points, not because of it. What had happened here is, you know, I'd seen, I didn't need to wait for anybody else. Okay, let's carry on. And I just kicked in with autopilot, and quite different decision. Chris, Jake, Pete, and the 2 other flyers just slightly ahead of us had quite rightly gone to fly south over the moor. Billsdale transmitter is there and is a big landmark. I was in cloud, and I was kind of maybe thinking that the day was, let's get to cloud base and fly downwind. Nobody had set a goal. We hadn't really talked about what our task was for the day. So you can see here, you know, I'm going to repeat what I did for a bunch of other flights from Carlton Bank and try and fly to Scarborough or Bridlington. And then I get sucked into cloud. So I can't see that the other guys have gone that way. So cloud flying can occasionally be helpful, but, you know, This time it was certainly not helpful at all. And it was, you know, it was a little while before I realized I'm totally on the wrong track. So it was the wrong thing to be doing right then. I'm over the valley, no chance of a climb. And I'm just really envious at this point of Chris, Jake, Pete, and the two other North Yorks flyers who look like they're guaranteed a climb. But
why is there no chance of a climb over the valley as a novice?
So what's happening here is, you know, you've got to imagine, so the air's coming over Carlton Bank and it's going down Fangfoss. So the air's all coming down the back of the hill. And what that means is, although the sun hitting the ground there, the air is descending. And that descending air is going to sort of kill off any thermal activity. You might see a bit off of this ridge here or off that ridge there, but these two ridges are, you know, quite a bit lower. So, you know, typically, you know, you fly down the center or you get over the center of a valley, you're just not expecting to find lift there, and very rarely do I find that. Oddly enough, and thanks for interjecting, you know, Chris, Jake, and the team found no lift over this big dark moor. That the air, you know, the air that had been coming from the northwest had been traveling over this big dark moor. You can see there's just a very steady decline there, and you know it's 11:30 in the morning. The sun's been on it for a while. You'd expect it to have done stuff. Turns out that moor, July, the first couple of weeks of July had been a little bit wetter, and I'm putting that down to, because I've climbed over the Billsdale transmitter twice before now. I put it down to the moor tops just being wet, and then this amazing thing happens. And the two North Yorks guys find it first. Chris, Jake, and Pete then find it. I come in as the caboose, as the tail end Charlie, and we climb out over the valley. But look what's happening. I'll just pause it there. We'll look down our thermals. So we're looking north here, back to Carlton Bank and over the Billsdale Moor. We've got the sun, as you're looking at this on your screen, you've got the sun on your right shoulder. It's late morning. It's what is it? It's 11:52. It's just before midday. So the sun has been on those green fields. We have got a lee side climb here. So air may have come over the top and been affected by warm air in the valley, with that southeasterly face or that easterly face being warmed in the sun all morning. And I think that climb that we all got out was triggered on the lee side by the morning sun. So that's kind of a proper mountain condition. So we're out of a hole there. We're on to roll the next set of dice, and very quickly, you are onto the descending set of moors, because we're on quite a southerly track here. So the descending moors, again, that's suppressing the thermal activity as you go over them. So you want to be taking as many climbs as you can here. And it's early in the day, so you know, be conservative. Take the climbs where you can get them. And thankfully at this point, my earlier error hasn't cost me too much, and we're flying in a group of 4 here now. So what's happened as we approach, is that Middleham?
Kirby Moorside, I think.
Kirby Moorside, thanks. So yeah, as we approach Kirby Moorside, we've got Helmsley to our right. the other guys, three of them in the end, went down and flew over Helmsley and took a much more inland route. But as you can see here, that you know it's working pretty well into the Vale of York. And you know, if you can be high at the edge of the Vale of York, then it's just great flying across it because you're into more flatland established climbing. But the thing to just notice here, if we can go back, we've got these climbs in the wind, in the northwest wind. They're taking us to the coast. That's going to cut our flight short drastically. And we've all had flights cut short in the Vale of Pickering, you know, somewhere near Scarborough. So we're turning right and flying, you know, sort of southwest, I guess, here track, and we'll fly further southwest as we get nearer the sea breeze, because the sea breeze was even, I remember, apparent at this point as quite a long line in the distance. And you see there, we caught a few weak turns carved in them, and you know, turned 45 degrees from the track we were on. So it's a very, you know, it's like tacking in a boat, that the climbs take you one way and then you've got to go back inland and compensate for the distance that you just spent climbing, going towards the coast.
Yeah, can I just say, Pete, that was a really important strategic decision we made almost immediately. So by the time we got to Billinghay Mask, we knew that we wanted to glide in a much more southerly direction. If we'd have left that another 20k, we wouldn't have been able to cross the Humber.
Definitely, yeah.
That's a key point, really, strategically.
So this is flatland flying here over the Vale of York, and it's a good sort of 10-15k. A couple of climbs gets you across it, and so we're here over Malton, and just trying to establish ourselves into the Yorkshire Wolds, which are small, bumpy little things, a bit smaller than the North Yorks moors. Very bright, made of chalk, and there's lots of lovely little crinkly bowls, and it's great landscape to be flying over. The odd time that I've been over and had a good view of the Wolds. We are actually, you know, always tracking to the west of them. Other flights I've had have been way more over here, over Wetwang, and the famous fish and chips place, if you ever end up there. But we were
what the graphics don't show you is the clouds. What flying up to base each climb, were the clouds very obvious that you were going to the next one?
Yeah, let me show you the kind of day it was for the clouds. So that kind of shows you the clouds up at, maybe that's at 1,300 meters, and we're approaching the Humber estuary there. You see Jake's down to Pete's left. Props to Pete for these photographs. He was the only one that had the presence of mind to turn up with working batteries, a helmet, a camera, and working navigation. Like I say, this flight happened despite some of us being there. So here, the clouds, I do remember being quite a bit raggy, and occasionally there was some high cirrusy stuff to the southwest that the sun was in and out of from time to time. Obviously not terribly serious. But this this, I think, was a bit of a. It was not a great section for us. I think the Yorkshire Wolds. It seemed like, you know, you get into the hills, it should have worked better. You know, it's still early in the day. It's 1 p.m. here. But we're getting shallow climbs. We're hanging on, but we're not able to, you know, climb quickly, glide, climb quickly and glide. And this sort of comes to a head here. And I remember here we had an odd bank of cloud that looked as though it should be working, didn't really work when we got to it after this climb here. Now I'll just stop here because this is absolutely key to what we're doing. Every time we finish a climb, it's just automatic behavior. You fan out. And it's 100 meters or a couple of 100 meters. Sometimes it's a kilometer. It, you know, depends on people's different decisions. Maybe I'll be able to set a number, you know, the ideal distance to fly apart when I've modeled enough thermals. But this is just automatic behavior now for us. And Pete's out on the left or right somewhere. And you see, I've been able to find a climb. Chris has come over and joined us. Then it all really, I mean, it absolutely goes to pot here. You know, we're just searching, and let me get a better angle of that.
Yeah, we're below 500 meters now.
Yeah, we're
Pretty
below.
low.
Anytime you're below takeoff, you're worrying, aren't you? And it doesn't sort of look like it from this angle, but these are quite tight little valleys. Chris is great. Chris finds it. And I obviously have a little problem here. You know, I'm a little bit lower. I'm worried about landing. I'm going to desperately hang on to whatever I can find. And you know, one of the key things that you do is you find a little twitch of some description and you fly into wind. You know, so I've flown back towards where I think the climb's coming from. My best guess is it's coming from this high point here. It wouldn't be coming from down in this valley. Rarely would it have come from down in this valley. But, you know, with the air being on this ridge here, because there's no obvious trigger point, any lee side in this valley, any heat that needs to rise in the turbulence on the back of this valley is going to trigger a thermal there, and that's kind of what I was hoping happened. So I flew into wind and was just getting absolute crap. Chris radioed back, sort yourself out, Pete. So I flew into wind again and caught an absolute corker, and I'm going up at 3 meters a second at some points in that short part of climb there. And then I don't know if this is an inversion or what, but we don't get to base on this. But Pete and Jake at this point have gone a different route, and they've built their own climb out. But always, you know, if we're not in a 4, because people make different decisions on a flight. You know, sometimes, you know, especially when you're low, you can't join back together immediately. But we were always in 2 pairs here in some description. So Jake and Peter have also built their climb out. And now we're kind of, you know, we're sort of back on for the day. Things are looking happier after that sort of first low save where we'd got within maybe, you know, certainly within 1,000 foot of landing. You were thinking of a field. I don't know, Jake. You got a bit lower there. Were you thinking of a field?
No, I thought we were all right. There was stuff going on, wasn't there?
there was stuff happening. You could see stuff was happening.
But yeah, it could have been 2 minutes. You know, a different 2 minutes, we would have been all on the deck, wouldn't we?
Yeah. Now here was good. We were kind of gliding off track there a bit, but we were going for a cloud because we know, we've got the Humber properly in view at this point. So it's important that we cross it high. Otherwise, drowning and policemen knocking at people's doors is going to happen, and it wouldn't be fun. Oh, wait a minute.
If I remember rightly, we had a really good cloud to go to here.
Yeah.
Like an absolute no-brainer. Just go to that cloud, it'll work. And then this was our slightly sketchy long glide, isn't it?
Yeah. So that long glide, I don't know whether it's that I'm flying. I fly a 2015 KN5. It's an ENC. It flies. I love it. It probably doesn't fly as well as two Xenos, but certainly on most of the lines, I find myself, I'll set off at the same time, and I'm a little bit behind. But I think just in this case, Jake, you've got the better line, and I've recognised, we're at sort of 400 meters. I don't need to be on this line. I've been on a sinky line, so I'm coming over to you at this point, Jake, because you look sky high. In fact, you're not that high at all, but you just look like you're in a better position than me.
Yeah.
And Chris and Pete break. So there's a different decision in the group here. They're going for this quarry here, which, I've made this decision here. I'm with Jake. What I can't do is then go and change my mind, spend height, knowing that there's no lift in between me and Chris, trying to catch up with Chris for the risk that Chris is going to take. So, you have to make your bed and lie in it. So this one's worth slowing down. And, getting down to sort of 300 meters, I've radioed saying, I've picked my landing field now and have a good flight, guys. Because the ground at this point is sort of 70 meters high. I've got a minute or two. And then I just, I see this kite, and this kite comes and flies ahead of me, just under me. And it's, just an amazing thing. if that bird would have been looking in a different direction and had come by 5 seconds later or before, I wouldn't have been looking in the right direction. But I saw it coming along, turned right to follow it. And what it was doing, that's a line of trees. And here is a relatively open area. There were no crops here. It was bare soil. So it was textbook source and trigger. So I turned along this line of trees and just see the trees blowing about. It's beautiful. And I get my climb out over Swanland. And I just remember thinking, I am not letting this one go. Just wondering, if the people of Swanland underneath me, because I could see into their garages and their driveways and stuff, if they knew the drama that was going on above. But at this point, you can see again thermal behavior. What happens when thermals trigger, and you can see down Chris's line that he's had something well forward. Chris and Pete have had something well forward and to the west. Jake's thermal line has come from before mine. you know, so you can see mine is after. So there's like, I can visualize that as 3 tendrils of an area of generally warm air where it's released in 3 different areas at least at the same time. And then I top out on that little bubble I'm in and just go and find the next one. So, you know, this general lifting had led to actually 3 or 4 columns that we could actually use as a way out of our dire situation. And it was a dire situation. There was no way we could have even flown to the coast from the height. Well, from the height I was at, I wouldn't have made the other side of the village. And to then be able to cross the Humber after that was just smile on my face all the way across. Like I said in the article, it's one of those moments that you fly XC for, and sometimes there aren't a lot of them, but when they do come, they're kind of quite good. I'll give you a view of what that looked like. So that's west east, looking over the Humber Bridge and out to well, eventually Spurn Point, but Hull's on the left and Barton on Humber on the right. Yeah, that's cool. And then that's looking inland, and so I guess the tide was out, and these huge bars. So, you know, I guess if you're in that situation and you've got a dodgy line over the Humber, you know, maybe you've got a chance, a rescue on one of these sandbars. But what a position to be in. You know, I do feel privileged. So Jake kind of makes a great point here. You know, we've got to be fairly conservative over the backside, because it's going to take, the air is going to cross the water, the energy in it's going to die, and it's going to be a few kilometers until the climbs re-establish themselves, and that's what you see here. So Jake was right that the air didn't get buoyant again until a couple of 3-4 kilometers over the other side of the river. So that's quite a big thermal effect from the river there. I've managed to join up with Pete, so I'm flying with Pete, keeping the rear guard here. And at this point, we kind of lose sight of Jake and Chris. Jake, what was kind of making you fly over to the back end of Scunthorpe? Because there was a load of murky cloud there.
Yeah, there was. Well, again, we didn't want to go towards the coast, because what you can't see here is the sea breeze wasn't that far away, really. It was only probably 8 or 9k towards the coast. We just wanted to keep out of that air, really, and go inland. Struggling to work out like an overall direction we're gliding now.
Yeah, so this is
thinking about the airspaces as well, didn't we? We were coming into.
That's right, yeah.
So we were trying to keep to the west of them.
Humber International Airport.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, I'll just tab out of here.
There you go.
You're quite right, Chris. I actually went on holiday and we went past Humber International Airport. We're just going the sort of scenic route, and really, it doesn't deserve any airspace. I mean,
so it was near Brigg where we got quite low again, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was. So me and Pete were perhaps in a fairly decent position, although Chris, you're looking pretty good here. Jake, you were starting to get worryingly low.
Well, I I was following Chris there, and eventually I got low enough that I just didn't want to stay on that line. And just as I turned away from it,
Hmm.
like a minute later, Chris was climbing. I should have stuck with him. Sorry about that, Chris. Yeah, but then I found myself in no man's land, and I was between you and Pete were kind of mincing around, weren't you, at that point?
Yeah, so this is the point I wanted to bring out about flying fast and slow. And here, because of this horrible, huge wodge of murk over Scunthorpe, everything just seemed to have switched off, and you've got to tune into that and come off the brakes. And so I do remember a couple of calls between me and Pete saying, let's go for this sewerage farm over the west side of Brig, because sewerage farms work, and they do, and it in that area, industrial estate sewerage farm, we kind of found this sort of really slow climb here, meter a second. But if that's what it takes, you've just got to have the patience to go with it. And every turn, your eyes are out for birds, dust, plastic bags, convergent trees and wind farms blowing on the ground, or waves in. I remember trying to look for waves in that reservoir that we've got down on the floor, and just build out of this slow area that you're in, because conditions, change, and you've got to change with them.
So I was very lucky there. I think I got down to about 100 meters above the ground.
Yeah, that was your low save, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that could have easily been the end of my day.
So Pete, that sewage farm thing, what is that, because of the heat generated by the sewage itself, or?
The sewage farm at Hawes is always known to work, and it has before. It's always got that decay heat, so it's always being a source itself.
Yeah.
Stuck in an industrial estate as it was, it just seemed like it was the most likely place, I guess. Cool. But quite often on other flights, I've had things like sewerage farms, pig farms work quite well as well. I remember in Italy, in Ivrea, being able to just sit on a very incredibly cloudy day, and I just sat above a pig farm for about half an hour. I wasn't particularly going up, but eked, at about 20 centimeters a second, eked enough to fly over the motorway on the end of this XC flight to close it, and then land at the place where we'd parked the car, and it was like, phew.
Smelly thermals?
I could smell it, yeah. So here, some time has passed, and there's just a little point I wanted to bring out here. I'm getting tired, and I just go off on one because I was kind of thinking that sea breeze, it's hunting us down. It'll get us sooner or later. I want to fly inland, so I choose this big track. The cloud looked as though it should work, and I just went off on one without sort of realizing what the other guys were doing, and soon corrected it. It didn't help much, but we're sort of 4 or 5 hours into flying, so fatigue is certainly starting to weigh in. There's also another couple of factors. You've gone to that new area. This is new ground for me. I've got this amazing view of the rest of England. I've done something respectable for the day. So if it all goes wrong now, who's complaining? And you've got to fight all of those thoughts, concentrate on the game that you're playing. The game that you're playing is maximizing the conditions for the day. It's arbitrary, but it's fun.
Pete,
Yeah.
Did you eat or drink anything?
Drinking, yes. I kind of keep my own drinking, you know, to sort of wetting the mouth, but I don't eat on a flight. The harness I've got, I don't have a lot of storage in, actually. I maybe should, but if I drank more on a flight, I'd need to pee more, and that would entail sorting out a pee tube. And I'm quite anti having extra faff on takeoff. And you know, I realise that works both ways. You know, because you know, there's been a flight where I've had to pee midair in absolute. I had to do that because I was in agony and I couldn't get down. You know, it was a flight heading over to York, and I was just trying to fly down a railway line because that was the easiest, quickest way into York, and couldn't get down, so I ended up having to pee midair, quite successfully in the end. But I was able to then carry on flying.
It should be part of the advanced pilot exam, is being able to successfully pee in the air.
So Pete, have you ever used a pee tube or something? I mean, you say you can't be doing with the faff, but to be honest, it's like 3 or 5 minutes and you sort it.
I know. In my head, it's 3 or 5 minutes, as well as the 3 or 5 minutes of everything else as well. So I'm just, it's only additional time, but it's just not something I've really sort of taken to. But you know, learning the craft, maybe I should.
Personally, I find it so liberating. It makes it so much easier.
Well, Martin swears by it as well.
If anybody wants me to give any seminars on
a demo, Martin, a demo.
I like it so much that I wear one all the time now.
Rosie, there's your next club night.
Is he going to do a female version of it as well? Because it's very male-dominated conversation then.
No, sheepies, we're not sexist here. Sheepies are available.
Excellent. Well, it's a great chat, but maybe we should keep the ball rolling with the flight.
So, you know, here, flying faster, the climbs are faster. We're into good, established clouds, blue holes, and so here's where we're you know, hoping, even though it's late, to still have quite a bit of distance in the day. Thermals are bigger, fatter, wider, and we do.
This is about where we lost Pete, isn't it?
We do hit a small snag. Yeah. So just like I'd gone off searching, you know, Pete, and I, you know, I soon corrected, Pete's no sort of shrinking violet, and it's at this point, you know, we sort of realised Pete had actually got a couple of kilometres away, and was actually, you know, sort of quite a bit lower than us. So maybe at maybe 400 metres here. I do remember a view of him in this sort of tree bowl, and he was over this race course here. So that's our change of direction, because we're, you know, hoping to come in over him and try and guide him onto something that's flying. And Pete actually does manage to sort of dribble another 5K and lands, if you can see my cursor, you know, maybe somewhere around this road here. And actually, you know, we're in this blue hole that we're getting low in as well. But again, the advantage of flying in formation in a chevron, and you know, one of you will find something. And in actual fact, all three of us found something. Again, you know, separation between these climbs. So there's a general area of lifting columns of air. And I just want to give you a bit of a view of that. let me just change over. So, I've just grabbed some visualizations of thermals there. So a single thermal here, but if you can see here, there's absolutely very well formed columns, but they sort of they morph into each other. So be prepared for climbs to start in two and merge into one. There's a hell of a lot of chaos happening here, even though they're ordered thermals. You can see that as much here as well.
Sorry, Pete, you said, and I remember reading your write-up, and you said now that you guys went kind of to go over Pete to see if you could show him the way, so that he could get up. I mean, that kind of slightly confused me, because I mean, there's a very good chance that the thermal has already left his level, the thermals that you guys are catching and showing him.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. There's thermals can be these rolling bubbles, these royals, these hoops that just rise, and they're actually quite short. And they can also be, these absolute mushroom clouds where you've got these entrainment lines on the side as well, where air is entrained in on the side. So there's, part of the visualization of the climb that you're in is, am I in a sort of a toroid that's only a few hundred meters in depth, or am I in an absolute monster that's still being fed from the ground, even though there's something at cloud base? And yeah, so the hope is that you're always, you're always going to be in a column that's connected to the ground, that's got another, sort of 10 square kilometers of hot air to shove your way.
Can you tell the difference?
That's not always the case. You can tell the difference when you fall out the bottom.
I think one of the strategies of that glide, from my point of view, was that Pete was never really going to get much information from us. We could get a lot of information from him. So we didn't want to go off on a glide miles away from him, because if he'd started climbing, we would have missed that cycle. So if he had have started climbing, we would have been straight on him and we'd have climbed that. But we watched him just get in a really bad position. Well, watched him not find a climb. And that's just information, isn't it? If you see someone in front of you not climbing and getting low, then you want to change course. So, that was a snippet of information we got from Pete, was that we need to turn right. If I remember rightly, I think that's what we did. If he'd climbed in a different throw of the dice, he would have climbed there and we would have been straight on him and we've all joined up. So he was just unlucky, really. The timing was bad.
Trying to keep the team together. But yeah, just going back to your point, Charles, the thermals low down are more frequent than the ones sort of higher up. You can see here in this diagram. So that it's different behavior, and it's a case of putting a model together in your mind when it is desperate. On a climb on a XC like this with 23 climbs, most of the climbs you get, you don't really have to think about too much. But I'd say a quarter of the climbs, are the ones that enable the next 50k. So we've kind of resigned to sort of losing Pete at this point. But Pete's sort of managing to get on to the next village. Because of the Frank Spencer moments, he's actually talking us round airspace, or helping us to avoid airspace, because we've all got Flymasters. They'll beep when we're next to airspace, but they're not great at showing our relationship to the airspace. And and it's at this point we're really on new ground. We've got Lincoln we can see to our right, but we've got fens in front of us, and these fens are these very low depressed areas. And because of the rain I talked about earlier on, this is a disused airfield, by the way, that we blatantly fly over. Then the fens are actually quite wet. So we were on the radio talking about how we can directly fly over the fen, not along the fen, as it were. And you can maybe see that here. There's a river and a dike, and then a sort of big depressed flat area. And we're coming down to sort of Cottingley sort of area, and I think one of these actually is Cottingley, and this is the sort of the zenith of the flight. The last time we're high, and you know, I think we were kind of knowing that we were maybe on our final glide, but because you know, it's 20 to 6 at this point. But just amazing to have got in to a position where we could see the wash. You know, not conceivable to the old me, and now it is just an amazing position to be in. Again, I think Jake and I had been on the radio, and we'd on this glide we'd got a bit of target fixation of getting over another of these fens. We'd seen, I think, an incinerator on a main road, and thought that was a good place to land, which I was kind of going for. There's a line of 3 villages, one just to our right centre that I go over, and then Billinghay itself here. And again, I argue against target fixation, whether it's a safety aspect of your flying or a cross-country decision, because, you know, I've flown over one town. I know that late in the afternoon a town's warmed up, and you know, being towns that are on slight rises in this kind of landscape, I should have turned left at this point and flown over Billinghay, as Jake and Chris do. So I don't quite make the road. I wang in a turn and land on a tiny little unmarked, almost unmarked road, and managed to stop the glider from going into one of the ditches at the side.
How's Avery measuring the distance? Because you've got a distance of, is it 286 kilometres at the moment? What's that?
So that's the straight distance between each of the points per second on my flight. So that's all of the zigzags that I've done, and it's all of the circles that I've done as well. Chris needed to land for biological reasons, I think. Is that fair to say, Chris?
Yes, Pete, it is. I was absolutely bursting. Yeah, we did actually find a very weak climb. But I think we'd all agreed to land together at that stage anyway, so it didn't seem fair, and I did need the loo, so fair's fair.
Yeah. So quite rightly, you know, sort of Jake is hardwired, like all of us, to stay in lift because we're British flyers. But then decides to land. We'd been on the radio. So I'd landed into wind coming up this road. What had then happened is that the wind had shifted, so the sea breeze had come in at my level, and I think the sea breeze had maybe kicked off that climb. But you know, what could we maybe have done to fly a little bit further? Well, you know, that sea breeze kicking off a thermal there, we could have maybe got another 10k from that. I think if we'd have chosen a better wind direction. Better wind direction would have given us a more northerly track. And if we were to fly with speed bar with that more northerly to south track rather than having to zigzag, I think with straightening out the zigzags, we'd have flown 200 kilometers that day and maybe got to somewhere near Boston, maybe a bit further inland because of the sea breeze. And then another thing to bear in mind that's a limiting factor on a flight like that was the fact that Carlton Bank it's a north-facing hill, and therefore the sun is not actually on the face itself. North is always going to be later to climb away from than many other wind directions, particularly sort of southeasterly facing hills, and that's evidenced by the fact that we perhaps got 2 lee side climbs in that cross country. That earlier on, different directions of hillsides are working to give you the thermal to work with. But then you've got to balance that with the look. So a lot needed to go right to get this flight. We had 2.5 low saves. The direction that we took worked out to be very good for the airspace that we encountered later on. We were able to get between. There's quite a lot of airfields around there, and we did actually land under the panhandle of RAF Coningsby. We also had a good balance of, so the wind speed that we took off on in Carlton Bank was enough to take off in, but it was also enough to hold the sea breeze back so that we could continue the flight all the way through into Lincolnshire. And on other days, I've seen the sea breeze further inland than we've had it on that flight. And there were four pilots who knew the area, who'd had a little bit of experience of that before. But questions?
Can I just mention, Pete, Dave Smart, who finally got back to the hill about half an hour after we left.
Yes, I meant, yeah, go on.
Managed to do about 75-80% of that flight on his own.
Yeah.
Got down, crossed the Humber and carried on down into Lincoln.
Yeah.
And to land at about, I can't remember exactly.
He landed at Brig, didn't he?
130, which is absolutely phenomenal on a day like that. Yeah.
And I think the 3 guys inland from us had they got to nearly York as well, I think, hadn't they?
Yeah.
And Graham McEnany, he as a relative newbie, did 48k that day, didn't he?
He did he?
Which was quite, yeah.
Okay.
I was so jealous of him.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the wind caused a few issues on takeoff itself, and but it's that fine balance between holding the conditions back, the sea breeze in this case, and still being able to take off. I mean, so just to fill in the rest of the story, Richard Meek managed, I think it was about 150k flight to goal, down in the peaks. So those good conditions across the whole country, and when you get this as the cloud base, even though the cloud base at 5,000, a lot of our flight was in the 4,000 foot kind of range. We weren't getting a 6,000 foot cloud base, so that there wasn't oodles of time to be finding your next climb. But then again, you can see from the numbers of clouds developing here that the lower base gave us more climbs, I think. And you find that as a measure of the day, that the lower the cloud base, the more frequent the climbs are going to be.
Yeah, I looked at the track log, Pete, from that. 8 times we got below 500 meters. So we weren't. It didn't feel. It wasn't a flight that felt like we were in orbit a lot of the time. A lot of the time, it felt that we were,
Yeah,
scratching around a bit. And
it did need us to work for it, didn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And our average speed was only 24 kilometers an hour, so it was very slow.
Yeah.
But we were in the air for 7.5 hours, so that's what brought us the distance.
Yeah. So one of the things I'd kind of like to start to work out, and for me, I need to put a number on it. If you're flying in a group, what is the cost of putting speed bar on? What is the cost of going downwind on half or 3/4 bar in terms of the extra sync that you get versus the extra capability for searching for climbs?
Why is that different as a group as opposed to just a glider by itself?
Well, this is what I want to put the numbers on. So when I finish programming, I'm sort of writing in a bit of Python, a big massive space, and I can randomly create a thermal at points and just throw gliders down this space and work out, if 2 gliders are separated, it's like they're pushing a line across the landscape as opposed to pushing a point across the landscape. So that line is going to search out, you're going to feel with your right or your left wingtip more air. And you're going to sample more air, you're going to find more climbs in a group. So we all know that gaggles find climbs much better, so long as you're not sort of committee flying, in the same circle. But how much better? And if it is how much better, how much faster should you fly to give yourself a greater distance, for that sort of probability of thermals being in the future for you? Does that answer your question, John? So this. Yeah, go, Mark. Or Ed.
Right. More an observation. When I read your article and following this presentation, I'm always struck by the power of the gaggle. But it's not quite as simple as that, is it? Because to get a number of people who think alike, can work together, fly at the same pace, hang back for each other and fly in a very unselfish way, that's quite difficult, isn't it? I mean, you've achieved that between 4 or 5 of you over there now. You've got a really good gaggle that really works well together.
Yes. It's not easy, no. Because, we are all independently minded pilots, and 2 things happen on a cross-country flight. You make a different decision and you go with that because you think you're right. And that separates you. Or you're just a little behind, or you're just a little below, and you look and see what that other pilot's doing. And they just, I get this impression that that's just an area I can't go to. If I got there, I'd be at 100 meters and I'd be thinking of landing. So you're right, Ed. It's not the easiest of things, and that's why I'm wanting to sort of engender this idea of buddying up for cross country, because groups of pilots will develop together, will have the same sort of capabilities, the same sort of horizons and ambitions. And that will work for bringing on their flying ability whilst, they're committing to flying together and searching together. And that will help them develop better. And also, they'll be in the same groups for retrieves as well. So, as each pilot sort of pays their dues, does their apprenticeship, then being in a group of buddies makes that work much more effectively, I think.
Could I just ask about your radio comms?
Yeah.
You only mentioned twice, as far as I can recall, having a chat on the radio, but I'm assuming that you were all in regular radio contact, the whole 4 or 5 of you, during the whole length of the flight.
Yes, yeah.
And that you were quite economical in the information you were passing towards each other, and you were all fairly much in agreement with decisions that were, once they were made.
Yes, yeah, I think so. Jake, Chris, can you remember any sort of dithery or disagree type moments?
Yeah, I think the comms is always good, and we always fly really well together until we get low, and then we just have to do our own thing. Once you're below a certain altitude, you just really have to perhaps play your own game at that point. And but yeah, no, we were pretty good, weren't we? There was no, we knew early on that we were planning to cross the Humber around about that point. It was kind of the ideal. We kind of didn't imagine we'd get there, but that was always the plan, wasn't it?
That was, yeah.
So,
I mean, just around Beverley, we had that weird sort of incident when there seemed to be a family, it seemed to be a father and a couple of kids who were on our radio channel. So we actually had to ask them to switch because we said we couldn't switch. We're in the middle of the air.
yeah, was that Moulton? I don't think it was Beverley, was it?
Was it not as far as Beverley? It was probably.
Well, we didn't go anywhere near Beverley, did we?
Beverley was further out to our east.
Yeah,
on our track. Yeah. So this is a bit of the cloudscape as we were landing, so that we had quite a bit of alto Q fill in, a little bit of wave, so there's still a bit of wind about. Hastily contrived retrieve that the taxi was very reasonably priced and took us back to Chrissy's car on the A59, which was by far the best decision, I think, for us getting back. It was still late, so this was a photograph I managed to get of Comet Swift Temple Tuttle something or other. What was the comet in July last year? Does anybody remember? No. Anyway, it looked really nice. It looked way better than it is in that photo.
Pete.
Yeah.
Quick comment on the radio. A little anecdote. When we were heading towards Hull, and I was on the west side of the gaggle at that point, and I headed off towards Brough. Chris came on the radio and said, "What are you doing, Pete?" I said, "I'm heading over this way because there's a quarry and there's a train station at Brough." And Chris got back to me quite rightly and said, yes. "Pete, there's a train station at Lincoln."
Good call, Chris. Unless there are more questions, thank you for listening. I'm hoping I will enjoy being the chief coach, and if anybody has any good ideas, I'm all ears.
Yeah, thanks for that, Pete. I definitely would be keen on some, I guess, intermediate style coaching. You know, this kind of gaggle flying XC type stuff that you're talking about. I'm really keen for that.
Sure.
Yeah, you've got to. I like the buddy system because you've got to sort it. You've got to plan it before you launch, haven't you? If you're going to, like Ed was saying, you don't stick together naturally unless you.
Yeah, I think it's a really good discussion point, because you can see the advantages of flying as a gaggle, but equally it's not easy to fly as a gaggle in itself. I mean, how many times have you tried to fly together with one other person? I know I've tried it and I haven't seen them all day. We've got to remember that Pete and Chris and Jake, and more latterly Pete Darwood, have been flying together for years, and they haven't done this on their first flight together.
Yeah.
Just on the gaggle flying thing, I've noticed over the last, I don't know how long as I've been flying, that the more successful pilots tend to fly in teams. They're not necessarily always flying as their big flights as individuals. So you've had the teams that formed down south. You had the Pennine Bad Lads a few years ago, which Mike latched onto. I've never managed it. I was talking to Gary Stenhouse the other day. He's never seemed to manage it as well. We tend to fly as individuals, but we are aware that whilst there are occasionally some advantages, we are losing out somewhere. But whenever I've tried to fly as a gaggle, it's just never worked. I just can't fly in gaggles. I cannot cooperate or get on with another group. I just go and do my own thing. Within a thermal or two, I'm away. And I always just make my own decisions. It's the only way I can fly. I'm just not a team player, I don't think.
It's noticeable, Ed. The North-South Cup I was down at in September this year at Froster. And the southern pilots there just, meshed and were in the same climb out together. And a fair proportion of the good ones there landed in Reading together as well. And then there was a following gaggle after that of other southern pilots. We did get roundly trounced, did the northern team.
I guess a lot of it is about trust, isn't it? And why it's important to form this flying relationship with one another. Because it's all too easy to think, oh, I know better, I'm going to go over here. You can't have a discussion in the air about it for too long and say, oh, should we go that way or should we go the other way?
And people are aware of the dangers of committee flying, where you reach the top of a thermal and suddenly you're still circling, but you're going down at 0.5 meter a second, and you do that for 2 or 3 minutes. And that's, that's just something to be avoided as well. I mean, one of the points that I did want to bring out there is, particularly for British flying and my flying, I would characterize as being relatively conservative in terms of hanging on to climbs that perhaps I shouldn't, but I know I shouldn't. When it's low down, when you're on low save duty, yes, but always worth being aware that you're reaching the top of a climb. And as you can see on screen here, not every thermal is that well formed by the time it's got to the top. Some of them are dying. They were never fed with enough air. They've entrained too much cold air as the vortex has risen. So when that thermal dies off to below 1 meter a second, and you're sort of 3/4 of the way to base, perhaps think about leaving it unless you know that you're having to cross through an inversion sort of area, and be less conservative and more direct with, going and picking up that more common climb low down.
I think probably the thing about why you guys work so well together is you all have full confidence in each other's ability and decision making. So if someone makes a decision, you're probably fairly confident in the quality of their decision, and they probably agree with, probably is pretty close to your reading as well, given that you all are of such caliber.
And I think people need to grow into that sort of state together. Through repetition, through sort of 20k, 30k, 25k, 40k, 50.
Yeah. Let's hope 2021 brings it to us. Let's hope we can travel any distance for exercise very soon. Christ.
Please, yes. I'm going a little bit stir crazy here.
Yep.
It's dry this weekend. At least we can get out somewhere.
Well,
go for a run or something.
I think if there's no more questions, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Pete for taking his time out this evening. He's given us loads to think about, and hopefully sparked a little bit of interest in flying again after sort of what is a pretty rubbish Christmas and New Year in terms of flying, but fortunately there hasn't been that much flying. But we've not missed out too much.
Great.
Thanks again, everyone.
Yeah,
Take
hope
care.
to see you out.
Thanks. Ciao.
Cheers, Pete.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Rosie.
Thanks, Pete.
Cheers, Pete.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Pete.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a
Thanks,
pleasure.
Pete.